Good evening.
Matt just sent me a text message that you can hear me. None of us can hear, well, I shouldn't speak for anyone else. I can't hear you, and I can't hear anyone else. Alice, can you unmute and
Lyndon,
tell them?
Lyndon, can you hear me? Good evening. Tonight is the March 1st, 2021 regular meeting of the Concord School Board. Calling it to order, and first order of business will be to take the roll of those in attendance. Ms. Cannon, will you please call the roll for us, please?
Absolutely. Ms. Higgins.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Parker.
I am here.
Ms. West.
Here.
Mr. Weinberg.
Here.
Ms. Walsh.
Here.
Ms. Hastings.
Here.
Mr. Richards.
Here.
And I am here. Full board is here in attendance.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today and thank all of those in the audience, both physically here and those at home. We have a pretty full agenda, and the first item of business will be approval of the agenda. I would like to make a motion to make one amendment to the agenda, and that would be that we would delete the non-public session. It is not needed this evening. So I make the motion to strike that from the agenda. Will someone second that?
Second.
Seconded. We do not need to take a roll call vote since we are all in attendance. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Are there any other changes or amendments to the agenda? Ms. West.
I'd like to make an amendment to add a statement, a motion to add a statement against Senate Bill 130.
Okay. Let's see. Where would we like to put that? Potentially before. Do we want to do it before recognitions or immediately after recognitions? I think let's do that immediately after recognitions, if no one objects. So that will be item number 4.5. That would be, at least that is the motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Weinberg. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Okay, that will be item 4.5. Thank you very much. Are there any other amendments or additions or deletions from the agenda? All right, not seeing any. I will move on. But I will say at this time that we do have a screen behind us, so if I seem to miss anything during the course of this meeting, please feel free to remind me or tell me, Jim, check the board back there especially during public comment period. Thank you. So we have a lot of minutes to approve. First of all, we have the regular board meeting minutes from February board meeting.
Excuse me, Jim, I'm sorry, but the board didn't vote to approve the amendment as agended.
Thank you very much.
Amended. Sorry.
I thought we had.
What didn't? Sorry, Lyndon, what do you say?
She's saying that we didn't approve the amended agenda.
Right, you approved the amendments, but not the agenda.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. That's correct. So, given the changes to the agenda, I move that we approve the agenda as amended for this evening. Does someone second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. Walsh. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Lyndon. I appreciate that. So we have 6 sessions of, one regular board meeting and 5 sessions of the board work on the budget for approval of board minutes. Does anyone have a preference that if we take them as a group?
I move that we take them as a group.
Okay. Okay, Linda, it was moved by Ms. Walsh that we approve them as a group. It was seconded by Mr. Parker. So all those in favor of approving the minutes as a group signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So we will be approving the regular monthly meeting of February 1st, the board work session of February 3rd for the budget, the budget work session of February 8th, February 10th, February 15th, and February 17th. Does anyone have any changes or corrections to those minutes that they would like to bring forward at this time? Not seeing any. Do I have a motion to approve those 6 sets of minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Weinberg. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. Higgins. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. We will now move into recognitions and reports. Superintendent, I believe the senior class is the first on our agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. It's my pleasure tonight to have the leaders of the senior class present to you their proposal for their senior prom. So I'm going to ask them to all come on down, and I think they'll introduce themselves and share with you their ideas for their prom.
Okay, so hi everyone. We're just going to make some quick introductions to start. So we're the CHS class of 2021 officers. My name is Neonta Nepal. I'm the president of the class of 2021.
I'm Neil Shea. I'm a class representative.
I'm Aiden Gleason. I'm the vice president of the class.
I'm Akriti Bhattarai, and I'm the secretary. So we're going to get right on and started. So this is the CHS class of 2021, and this is our prom proposal for this upcoming year.
All right, so here are some important factors to understand from the start.
Excuse me, can I just make sure that you speak directly into the microphone, because
Sorry.
you're speaking not only to us, but to everybody
Got it.
that are watching on TV and everything else. So if you would be so kind, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. All right, so let's go to the next slide. So a little overview. Prom will be taking place June 17th. Our hope is that most of the staff at CHS will be vaccinated by then, based upon the current timeline. There will be 3 police officers present and a nurse. The prom is CHS seniors only, so only those in CHS graduated class of 2021. No other guests are permitted from other grades or other schools. Here's some pre-prom expectations. So you should be tracking symptoms 2 weeks prior to prom, staying as isolated as possible in those 2 weeks. If you come in contact with anyone who ends up testing positive for COVID, you're not allowed to attend. If you're showing symptoms, you're not allowed to attend. No traveling out of state 2 weeks prior to prom. No attending large gatherings like graduation parties, weddings, etc. And acknowledgement slip will be signed by both the parent and the student attending, stating that they will abide by these expectations.
Next up would be our screening protocol. And this is some of the screening process. So chaperones will be in charge of only letting CHS seniors into prom. While checking off names, they'll be taking temperatures and asking about any symptoms these students shall have. Every student will only be let into prom if they are wearing a proper mask. No neck scarves and bandanas will not be permitted. Extra masks will be available. After entering prom, proper social distancing will be expected and almost mandated by chaperones. If you are caught without a mask on or continue to wear it improperly after one reminder, you will be asked to leave. And this is regarding the promenade. After screening, students will walk up to the school. This walk will replace our usually prom parade. It will be live streamed by CCTV in order to limit the number of people who will be attending this. We will also have sanctions in place so parents can spread out on the granite steps or in the green to view the parade. And this portion of prom should only last about 30 minutes before all students are seated in the building for dining.
All right, so dining. Food will still be provided, and we have protocols in place to maintain safety, but also allow students to have a quality meal. So we are converting the third floor of both buildings into dining spaces. We'll be spreading out tables that hold 6 individuals, and students will be ushered to their table in small groups by chaperones. Students will be sitting closest to the person they're attending prom with and spread out from others. Tables will also be spread out, and there will be assigned seating in case there is a need for contact tracing, but students will pick where they sit in order to remain closest to those in their pod. Masks must be worn unless you're actively eating, and chaperones will be monitoring this. Okay. So smaller groups will be allowed to get their food and then must be seated before another group can go to prevent overcrowding. 2 food stations will be available to prevent overcrowding, so there's going to be one central to the east building and then one closer to the west building. And then food will only be served by the caterers. No students will be allowed to touch any item of food until it's on their plate. And silverware and paper will be disposable, plates will be disposable so they can be immediately discarded after eating is complete. And Nianta will explain that. So yeah, as we talked about that setup, this is what the Main Street dining area will look like with the 6 feet distancing from those who are behind you and in front of you. You can see that the only people who you're not going to be 6 feet away from is going to be the person you are attending prom with. And that is what Main Street looks like. Same expectations applies to the orange carpet area. So Main Street seats 20 tables, orange carpet area has 18 tables, sorry. And the next slide will cover what Commons B will look like, same idea, with 17 tables. And then this is the science hallway, which will have 14 tables, and these tables are going to be set up against the walls and will only seat 4 people each. So this is an overview of the numbers. If you count the total possible number of people according to graduation numbers that we have so far, there's going to be 377 in attendance, but obviously, like every other year, kids will decide not to go, so we're expecting that number to be lower, but we are still accounting. If it were at its max, there are still 386 seats available with that distancing in place and having all those other protocols being followed. And you go next, yes, so then this is exit.
All right, so exiting the dining. Once dining is complete, tables will be dismissed. At this point, they will discard plates and silverware and make their way through the following exits. Commons B will exit through the Commons B staircase leading into the cafe. The science wing will go through the staircase leading into the main office area. Main Street will go through the west building spiral staircase leading into the gym foyer. And the orange carpet area will take the back route by the nurse's office and Commons D.
So then we move into dancing and activities for this prom. So you might be wondering, what will that look like in a pandemic? So that's what we're going to explain now. So the dancing protocol, we will have 3 primary dancing areas set up with music setups in all spaces. So we actually have 3 DJ setups too. And that will be in the gym, student center, and the Commons A learning space. And there will be overflow spaces outside where tables will be set up for students who feel the need to leave those indoor spaces. And for all 3 spaces, we'll be monitoring to ensure only 10% of capacities are being utilized. And if you look at the NH state guidelines right now, they're actually at 50%, so we're decreasing those numbers dramatically, and it'll still be more than enough space for the 377 kids who will be in attendance max. And no slow dancing will be permitted. We're just going to avoid that music altogether. And 0 tolerance for mosh pit creation, as we've seen in other previous CHS dances. We're trusting that students also understand how this year's different, and there is going to be no tolerance by any of the chaperones for that kind of behavior at this prom. And
as far as exiting the prom goes, there'll be 3 separate exits for those in each area room. The student center will be exiting through the student center doors. The gym will be exiting through the gym foyer. And Commons A will be exiting through the main entrance doors. Now, I would like to bring up one separate point as well. There is the idea of having the prom is already spread through CHS as a community, and there's already been like pages where girls have been buying their dresses already, even though we have not approved it, and they're just literally, this is the only thing they've had to look forward to this entire year. So the idea of having this is just sparking so much joy throughout the community.
Yeah, and these are just some final remarks I want to say kind of in addition to what Aiden said. So this presentation we have shared with you today, upon the approval, if you guys decide to provide that to us, we will be spreading it out to families and students, so this will be reviewed by them as well, so that they have full transparency as to the protocols for prom and what to expect when they get there. We don't want this to be a secret from anyone in the community. We have spent hours working through this plan as a team, as you can see by the setups we put in all of the spaces, and we are really hopeful and I've made it our top priority to make sure that this is feasible and safe for all the students who are participating. And despite the fact that this dance has not yet been approved, kind of like Aiden said, we already see kids going to try on dresses. They're also wearing masks in all their pictures. They are also understanding the severity of the situation that's going on right now. And we want to make this night special, and we want to make sure that everyone maintains safety throughout it. And we hope that we can get approval tonight. I know that that's a lot to ask, and you guys might have a couple suggestions, and we'd love to hear them. The main thing is we do have money we have to put down, we do have pricing and seating to figure out, and that is all on our timeline that we kind of have to account for. So the last thing I would like to say is I'd like to ask if the executive committee of the board would consider to motion for the approval of prom on June 17th at Concord High School with a zero tolerance policy, mandatory mask requirement, and enforced social distancing, and all additional expectations that are in this presentation.
Okay, well, thank you very much for what is clearly a well thought out and well researched proposal. You're asking for the executive committee, but I think you're actually asking the entire board to vote tonight. So,
Sorry.
I'm sure if you don't mind, there may be some questions. And personally, I have a couple I'm going to ask. First, you mentioned that there will be chaperones. Who will be chaperoning, and how many will there be?
So a lot of the chaperones will be those who are in the CHS building, so staff at CHS. If you looked at how graduation ran last year, a lot of staff, teachers specifically, were really eager to help out, so that's probably going to be the group we're reaching out to. In terms of chaperone numbers, we have not yet determined the specific numbers because that kind of comes down to how many students will actually be attending and how many teachers need to be monitoring that area. And they're also going to go through the same screening protocol that we make the students go through.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question I had is you said that they will be picking their seating and they'll be assigned seats. So I assume that will be in advance, that it'll be well in advance.
And that's the main reason why I was saying that the approval would be better sooner rather than later, because we are going to have a seating chart kind of prepared where students will come in and pick where they're going to be sitting in those 4 areas technically if you count the hallways. And that way we can also know who they're most comfortable with, who are the students they've been spending time with outside of school normally, and make sure that students are able to pick those seats way ahead of time when they put down their payments for prom. Okay,
I applaud you trying to keep people in pods and in their P group that they're within. The next question that I have is I like your creative idea with regards to your promenade coming in here. Is it going to be Concord TV that would do that?
Yes, we already discussed it with them, and they said that they could set up a live stream. And the worst possible scenario is the live stream, it may not be actively live, and it may have to go up a couple minutes later. But that's they said they already agreed to it.
Well, I will state that they do a pretty good job with our meetings. So I think you can be pretty confident. And I watched the basketball game last week, and that was really pretty good. But I do have a concern, too, because you say parents, and, parents can sometimes be quite a few. They're going to be in stanchions on granite steps and the green. When we did the graduation last year, we had 8-foot squares. Am I correct, Mr. Reardon? They were 8 feet? Right. And so it limited the number of people, and I'm a little concerned how many people we can fit and how we will limit them, because you know how us parents are. We tend to be kind of enthusiastic, but I don't want to create a situation that would compromise your prom. So have you thought that through, and can you offer any explanations?
Yeah, so for that, we are also open to the whole point of the live stream was to discourage any parents to feel like they can come. There will be the police officers who are set up there, so then I feel like that's more if it turns into some sort of a herd. If we do want to take out that part altogether, that is an option. We just thought about it as such a big thing in the community, and we wanted to see if we could maintain some aspect of that for this upcoming prom. But if the live stream is that's something we can talk about more, and if the live stream is the only thing in order to maintain student safety, that is also an avenue we are completely open to exploring.
Okay, I just am concerned about spacing, and I am hopeful as you are that the majority of our staff will be vaccinated at that point, and this
Yeah.
will be, but that would be, I don't think that would be something that would prevent me from supporting this proposal, but it is something I would want either the administration or perhaps the instructional committee to take a look at to approve that one aspect. But as I said, I wouldn't personally hold that up. Thank you. Those were my questions. Do we have other questions from the board? Ms. Higgins.
So we have these different dancing areas, which is also a phenomenal idea. So will where you eat dictate where you dance, or is there freedom for kids to go from one place to the other? Like, how will that work?
So the concept that we have is there's going to be one chaperone in each of the 3 rooms, and that way we have the numbers of how many are approved based on 10% of the fire safety capacities. And we will be kind of like how they do if you go to Walmart, and the ticker that they kind of have determining how many students are in the room at one time. So there will be freedom, because we were thinking about setting up some sort of a karaoke type thing in Commons A. So there will be some freedom in terms of moving from one space to another. But for the most part, the actual numbers in each of these spaces will be controlled.
And then I have a thought on the parent thing, although it adds to the timing of the evening, but you could, if there were, groups of students, so maybe from, 5 to 5:30, I'm making it up, is these groups, and those parents come. Now you don't have 377 kids waiting in line to make their big debut. The red carpet walk is a huge piece of Concord's prom, I get it. And parents wanting to see it is another huge piece. So maybe spreading it out, you sign up for a time, then it's one parent per child. Then it just might make it less. I'm just offering a suggestion.
Yeah, of course. And I think that is something upon this discussion.
Yeah, and then that's your time, and then the kids are in, and then the next group can come, and then the moms can do this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this.
Anything to mandate the event and make sure that it's we prevent that overcrowding from the family side, we'd be open to any ideas. And like I said, this is something that we can keep discussing as long as we see how COVID kind of progresses from here on out, and we can make adjustments accordingly.
Yes, Ms. Cannon, and then Mr. Weinberg.
So along with what Ms. Higgins was suggesting, I would just ask you to think about how you stagger people coming into the building as it relates to where they're sitting, so that the people furthest in and down the hall come sit first, and then how that,
Yeah.
so that people aren't walking past and you're not scooting and you're not, kind of like the way that you used to get on an airplane.
From the back.
From the back, yeah.
Yeah, and
Used
that's another thing that we were discussing actually, is either having chaperones or the new NHS inductees kind of coming in and helping out in terms of just that first beginning part of prom, so that they can usher in smaller groups of students to their seats, so that it's not a huge mass of students entering the building at the same time.
But I meant as far as doing the red carpet thing, so that it's a seamless, you come through the red carpet, you go to your seat. And so it's sort of a,
Oh, yeah, you just put the order,
yes.
right. Well, and if we did it where they ate, then the food, getting food and all this is staggered out as well. Not everyone's eating at exactly the same time.
The only problem with that,
Oh.
honestly, is you have to be careful of the timing, because by law, the food can only
Oh, for a certain time. Yeah, okay, got it. You guys have a lot to do.
Yeah.
Ms. Cannon, did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay, Mr. Weinberg.
Thank you for the presentation. It was
Yeah.
very comprehensive, and I know it's been a tough year for everyone in school. What I'm wondering is, have you thought about alternative, not changing this, but for students that still feel uncomfortable attending, and providing an alternative format for them to feel included?
Yeah, and this was another thing we had discussed previously, actually, and this is something that's going to obviously take more exploration once we know the more logistical aspects of prom, but having some sort of the live stream in terms of the actual prom parade, although this isn't an equitable experience, I feel for remote students, and I completely admit that, we would love to have some sort of a remote option where students can be involved and see, and even if we were talking about if there are some sort of gifts or things that go out for prom, if they can still have access to those. So we're trying to find ways, we're still kind of brainstorming those up, so that is something we want to prioritize though upon our further planning.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Walsh.
And my question is actually for Mr. Cashman, if he's available, just to talk about the ventilation and airflow of the dancing spaces.
We'll do exactly what we did early on in the when we came back to school, so we'll control everything to 100% outside air to increase airflow.
Okay. Did I, and I'm kind of going back, this is June the 17th.
Yes.
So it's warm.
Yes.
So will there be doors open and access to the, and any windows and all, but access to the center courtyard as far as that goes?
Yeah, and that's kind of where we touched upon that external seating and outdoor overflow space. So there will actually be tables set up for students to go outside in that little courtyard area, so that if all the doors will be open and things like that. That's why we wanted to actually up the officers to 3 instead, so that all those exits can also be like monitored, and we can make sure that the population of students is actually just this population of students to maintain safety.
Okay. But outside in that area would still be a mask
Yes.
zone? Yeah. The other question I have, I'm sorry, did I answer all of yours, Ms. Walsh? The other question I have is this prom accessible to all our students, those who may have some limitations or of mobility, and have you taken that into account?
Yes, this prom is accessible, especially because it's happening right here at the high school. There are elevators for anyone who has any physical disabilities that prevents them from other venues that we may have explored in the past, like the hotel. This also is going to be accessible in terms of it's just the building that we occupy every day, and everything should be right at your fingertips in terms of resources and bathrooms and all those other things, which is why we wanted to do the prom at Concord High School in the first place.
Thank you for that. Other questions? Mr. Weinberg.
Are you providing any guidance for post-prom activities and for students to still maintain social distancing and be safe?
Yeah, so that's another aspect that we were talking about when we were pitching the plan to Superintendent Murphy, actually. And although this isn't really, we as a student body can't dictate what other students do outside of prom, because this is 2 days prior to graduation, students understand the implications of any bad behavior they have post-prom, and it can also affect their participation in graduation. Outside of that, we will be encouraging students to maintain all of the safety guidelines that we proposed. Like we said, graduation parties, in terms of not attending those prior to prom, you have to set your priorities straight if you want to attend this event, and pushing your graduation parties past graduation probably won't hurt anyone. So activities like that, we're going to make sure that we encourage proper behavior, but that honestly is all we can do from that angle.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I just want to say how impressed I am. I mean, the sacrifices you're willing to take. In a normal time, people would look at this prom as not a prom at all, but it's a complete prom now. You know, and that takes a lot of maturity and a lot of tenderness in your heart, you know, to let go of things that matter on one level so that you can have the most that you can have. It's been my experience just a bit in communicating with other youth and especially with college-age students. You look at college freshmen and they don't break rules because the college seniors aren't very nice to them if they do. And so that method of thinking, I think Mr. Reardon would agree, a lot of our students will behave because they want to come here. They don't want to not have a prom. So those aspects included in are awesome. It's just impressive to me. So thank you for thinking of those things.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have another question, which is, we are all very optimistic and we're positive thinkers, but are there go, no-go dates where we have to reevaluate our situation that would make this decision as we go through the next few months?
Ms. Lamb, do you have any specific answer to that?
As far as the pandemic itself?
Yes.
Well, obviously, if it was like it was last year, no. And we are not looking to put anybody else, at risk.
Okay.
But I would have to say, with the things even were status quo as they are right now, I still think we put so much thought into this, and if we get the number of chaperones, which I'm pretty sure I can, because I've been able to rope them up for graduation, and they want to see these kids.
You really can't hear anything she's
Okay.
saying.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Ms. Lamb, could you please speak into one of the microphones so that the other folks can hear? Thank you.
You can just take this one.
Thank you, Lyndon.
I was saying that I don't think we're going to have to worry unless by chance the pandemic gets worse, which I can't see it happening. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, but with the vaccination going out more and more each day, I see our numbers dropping, not increasing. This group has put so much time and effort and thought into how we can do this safely. I do feel very strongly that we'll have no problem getting enough chaperones. As I said, teachers want to see, or anyone in the building wants to see these kids be able to celebrate their senior year. Personally, I feel confident. Don Hodges and myself, as the advisors, pulled off a damn good graduation last year. And that was done with a ton of thought, and this would be no different than whatever this coming year graduation looks like. And I think that, I am very confident, especially with this group of kids here, that we can do this safely for everybody. And we realize, like John, you had said, not everyone is going to feel comfortable, just like some kids didn't feel comfortable going to graduation last year. It is a personal choice, as is everything in life, and we will do something to make sure they're celebrated, as we did last year for those kids who didn't attend graduation too.
And another thing I would like to add is another main reason why we switched our venue to Concord High School is because we have more control in terms of payments and things like that. We're not setting a down payment on a venue. So based off whatever protocols you set for the school year going forward, we're going to be following those same expectations in terms of prom like we would for any other event.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent.
Wait, he needs...
Oh, I'm sorry. We had another.
I don't mean to cut anyone off.
Sure.
I just had two quick comments to make. One, Mr. Richards, you had talked about the fact of chaperones, and I just I don't know if we had mentioned the fact that we're not going to be allowing parent chaperones because we feel like they're just going to be a little bit more lenient with their kids about maybe taking a mask off for a photo or something like that. Yeah, we're not going to be allowing that. Mr. Weinberg, you had talked about after prom activities, that whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, they love to post their parties. So if we see that they're going somewhere, doing something they shouldn't be, then we actually have the knowledge to be like, hey, what were you doing? You can't really be coming to anything like that after something like that. That's just what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Mr. Gleason. Superintendent, does the administration have a position on this? And if so, would you share it with us right now? I'm betting you do.
I would like to yield to the principal of the high school, Mr. Reardon.
Mr. Reardon,
Well done,
I would very much like to hear from you.
Well, originally I was totally anti-prom because I could never get a date when I was in high school. But then these guys said if I can find an appropriate tux, I can take my dog Peanut. So they've had my complete support since then. As you guys, I've been completely overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness and attention to detail that these 4 class officers have had. And if the prom's in their hands, as it is, and along with Don Hodges and Lisa, I think we're going to be in good hands. Has my complete support.
All right, thank you, Mr. Reardon. I have a feeling not only these 4 students put some time into this, it seems that there were some adults and some other students as well, and I appreciate their efforts.
So, of course, I would yield to the high school principal, but they were kind enough to invite me and had an opportunity to see their presentation, ask questions of them, and they've invited me to the prom.
Wow.
And I intend to go. So I think that pretty much says how I feel about it.
I'll take you dress shopping.
And, yeah, well, you can take me dress shopping, and I already told them I'm going to make my husband wear a tux. So won't that be? Wait till I get home tonight.
Yeah. So I guess I've been asking questions, and I've been kind of tough. I'm going to ask probably the toughest question, and that is, Nianta, what's your biggest concern? What are you worried about in this that we should know?
I think my biggest concern is going to be going forward in terms of that whole aspect of the after prom that we can't control. I guess you just have to put your faith in the students at that point, and I do have complete faith that they will act responsibly during prom because you're going to be seen by other students, and we will do our best to set a good example. And I think once you see a couple kids doing the right thing, more kids tend to join when it's something as high stakes as this. I just hope that students will act responsibly afterwards because graduation is following on the 19th, and I don't want that event to be jeopardized in any way because of this one. So that is the only concern that I would have moving forward, and I think a lot of that just ends up kind of going with what Aiden said and making sure we as students are vigilant about checking who is doing what. It's not really our business, but it is in this type of time where public health is the main concern. And also just making sure that we're encouraging the right type of behavior from the lens of being leaders in the building.
Thank you for your assessment. Yes?
I just want to add that having a prom and regulating it in all the ways that we're trying to do partially avoids kids trying to do it on their own and having big parties to supplement their own prom. So in that way, I think we sort of avoid having a bunch of people doing a prom before graduation that isn't regulated and as safe as we're trying to make it.
Thank you.
To add to what Neil's saying, people have already talked about doing that. Like that's him saying that as an assessment, but students have already talked about how if we don't have this prom, they're going to have their own backyard prom and they're going to have their own events, and that also will jeopardize graduation just as much. So,
Well, thank you for your honesty, for your honest assessment, and for your thoughtful answers, as well as all the work you put into this. Anyone else have any comments or questions? I believe you would like us to approve this plan this evening.
yes, if possible.
Didn't you write out a little motion?
Yes.
Can I
You
see
wrote
it?
our motion for
Yes,
us?
you can ignore the executive
Get
committee.
from her. Sorry. Oh, yeah, that's fine.
So, Ms. Higgins, would you like to make a motion?
Well, I would. I move that the board approve the plan of the prom on June 17th at Concord High School with the zero tolerance policy, mandatory mask requirement, and enforce social distancing with the exception of your care, and all additional expectations laid out in this presentation, as well as commitment from the district administrative team to follow all state-mandated guidelines in place at that time, which will allow the board, the prom committee, and administrators to make safe decisions should they be required.
That's a
Someone emailed
well-worded.
that to me at some point.
I'll email it to you. I'll email it to you, Lyndon. It's me, Barb.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
A well-written motion, Ms. Higgins. Do we have a second for that motion? Okay, seconded by Ms. Smith. Is there discussion, further discussion?
Well, one comment I wanted to make quickly is that in the middle of the winter, during the holiday season, with lots of ups and downs, we as a district managed to have our athletes and co-curricular participants take part in their activities. And if we can do that, I just feel strongly that if we follow the same type of protocol and process, that a prom in June will be a manageable event. And that sort of dictated my thinking. You know, we took a lot of risk as a board to approve winter sports, and we had our trials and tribulations, but here we are. So that's sort of where I was coming from in thinking this is something we should support.
Mr. Weinberg.
Pam.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I support this. I just really want you to consider, I know Ms. Lamb talked about students who will not attend and finding an appropriate way for them to feel included.
Yeah, and you can get my commitment that that will definitely be one of our priorities moving forward.
Ms. Walsh.
I intend to support this. You guys did a great job with the proposal. I feel I would be remiss if I didn't add, because this is that I would also like you to be in school 5 days a week by the time prom comes, and I hope that we'll be hearing more about that from the superintendent, because prom is important, but so is school.
Okay. Other discussion among the board? All right, the motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstains? The motion passes. Thank you very much.
I'm in. Oh, I'm totally in.
Sure.
I don't know if I'd be.
You're disqualified.
All right.
My senior's in heaven, so I can shout.
Very good. All right. Thank you all. Superintendent, I think at this point we have our student representatives. So let's see. Ms. Richards, are you prepared, ready to go?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, wonderful. So, good evening, members of the board. Tonight, Janita is unable to be here, so it will just be me sharing with you. This past month was fairly quiet event-wise for CHS, and we didn't have the normal pre-break celebrations. Today, as you know, was the first day back for students after February vacation. I'm happy to report that we have made lots of progress on our bullying policy work. Last month, we finalized the planning and all of our various pieces in preparation for the focus group. Our focus group model is designed to give groups access to the full policy, but then have them narrow their feedback to a few assigned sections. There are various facilitation questions, but they center around two main areas: student experience with bullying, as well as directly looking at the policy itself. So those questions about, does your reading make sense? Do you have thoughts? What can be added or taken out? Prior to vacation, I facilitated the first focus group with the National Honor Society officers, actually some of the students that you saw here today. They were one of our trial groups, meaning they not only participated in the focus group as we designed, giving us great feedback on the policy, they also gave us feedback on the focus group itself, and we are doing this intentionally with our two trial groups. That way, if they have any thoughts or input on the way the focus group was designed or run, we can apply that to the rest of our initiative going forward. In order to hear a wide range of voices at CHS, the focus groups will include pre-existing organizations such as NHS that I mentioned earlier, 10 classes, and focus groups that will be created based on student interest. Looking forward to this month, Janina and I are hoping to get on CHS Live to introduce the project to all CHS students, and then follow up with a letter sent via email, which will give even more information on how to get involved. March is when we hope to hold the bulk of our focus groups, making this the time we are gathering ample feedback on the bullying policy. All of that feedback can then be taken, analyzed, and applied to revising and improving the district's bullying policy. We know this is a fairly big project to take on, but I know Janita echoes me when I say we are really happy to be doing this, working together and alongside Ms. Pally and Ms. Fisher-Anderson, and most importantly, making students get to express their thoughts on a policy being improved for us. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. That sounds very interesting, and we wish you continued success with your focus groups. We're interested and very excited to see the results.
Thank you.
Very good. Next, Superintendent, I believe we are up to your report. What do you have for us this evening?
I'm going to have to change where I am on the agenda. It's always hard to follow the students, I'm finding. They bring a lot of good information, and tonight's presentation was really terrific. They're well-spoken, they're well-presented. Alice is the same. I mean, she's articulate, and it's great to see students who can stand in front of an audience, be on live TV or on the screen, and be so articulate. So it's always tough to follow them. But I do have a few things I want to bring up tonight, and I want to start with ESSER 2. That's the second round of federal funding that the Concord School District will receive. As you know, we are eligible for $4.3 million. And we are currently, right now, brainstorming with our staff. We've already done some internal brainstorming. And how will we use that money? How will we leverage that money to help our students and to recover, if you will, from the last, will be close to 18 months. We are talking about supporting academics. That's our priority. We want to provide tutoring and summer programs in reading and math, especially for our young students. And in high school, programs both at the middle school as well as the high school around credit recovery. We know we have to address at least 5 areas with these funds. And these are the kinds of things that we've been talking about since we received notice that we would be eligible for these funds. And that's social emotional. That is critical. Our youngsters have been isolated in many times, really not part of a social setting, having the opportunities to be with their peers, interacting with their teachers. and including other things, even their outside activities, whether it's theater or dance or whatever our students choose to participate in. This has been a very isolating experience for them. So we want to have summer programs, and they have to be fun. They can't be, yes, we will have academics, I assure you of that, but we also want to have some fun summer programs. We talked about a camp that focuses on science and social studies, but it's outdoors, and it'll be fun activities, hands-on, project-based learning for our youngsters in the summer. We also know that we would like to work with our Boys and Girls Club as well as the local Y, so that we can work together to support the youngsters' programs over the summer. The second area that we will work on with these funds, and we've talked about, will be building upgrades to things like the mechanicals. As you know, Matt's done a fabulous job in assuring that our buildings' mechanicals were up to speed, but he knows that he still has other things that he wants to do around those mechanicals and making sure that they're at their premium use, and in terms of air exchange and heating and ventilation. So we will continue to monitor that. We're looking at air purification systems, cleaning equipment, and I think, Jim, you mentioned that tonight. We really will continue to do that. It's kind of interesting, you know. We haven't had any flu this year, a very little flu, right? And part of the reason is some of the protocols that have been in place, along with cleaning and the strong emphasis on hand washing. Those things will continue. One of the other things is we really have got really great feedback on the outdoor classrooms that we had, the tents at various sites. So we want to continue with that as soon as we can get our children back to school. We would want to be able to have access to outside classroom space. We know that technology has been an incredible resource, and we will need to work on technology and providing those upgrades, whether it's to the equipment, to the servers, to the routers, all the pieces that involved in wiring. You heard all the pieces involved in the technology. You heard Pam last week talk about the importance of the technology and the kind of work that we have to do. And finally, and I think really important, we haven't talked a lot about this, but we have the family, we need to do some family engagement. Families have been left isolated in many cases. We've asked our families to be teachers. We've asked them to figure out how to do Zoom and Google Classroom and Seesaw, and they've been somewhat isolated themselves. So one of the things that we'd like to use some of our money for is to be able to do some family engagement, where we can help them focus on what does it mean by a learning loss. What does that mean for your child, and based on whatever kinds of assessments we will give the youngsters. And also talk about social emotional learning, as well as the physical activity. I think we're going to have to ramp up physical activity. I think our kids haven't had as much of it. And so that is going to be a huge adjustment, so we want to look at those factors and work with our families on that. So family engagement was our fifth area that we would like to work on. There are other ideas. Our principals are working in their buildings, getting ideas. We'll put this all together and begin to write the responses to the grant. Haven't received the money yet. We're waiting for some final work from the Department of Ed, but they will be using the grant system that we currently use, which is really pretty easy for us to use. So we anticipate that happening very soon. And today the Commissioner mentioned there will be if the American Recovery Act passes in Washington, there will be additional supports and for our staff and for our kids and for the buildings themselves with that money. So I'll keep you posted on that. A couple of things, we've been working on budget. We're in pretty good shape in terms of the 21-22 budget, but we've spent a lot of time on that. You've spent a lot of time on that. We've had valuable input from you, and we look forward to finishing up the last few pieces. Today, we worked on the enrollment at the high school, as well as CRTC. We're anticipating that enrollment so that you'll have that for your next meeting. One of the areas that we talked about, you have had as a priority, was a special education evaluation in the district. And so we have developed our request for proposals. We're now seeking some organizations that do that kind of work. We want to find an organization that can handle the large number of programs we have in a city setting, which is diverse. And so the director for student services, Bob Belmont, is working on preparing that RFP to send out to organizations that do that kind of work. I think that work is important for the district as we move forward. Just recently, the governor provided executive order number 85. I guess there's been that many of them. And it was a little confusing, I think, for some, but we've clearly met the order. Simply put, the order expected that children be back in school, and the youngsters be back in school at least 2 days a week. Well, we already fulfilled that with our hybrid model. One of the questions came up because we have, at grade levels, we have youngsters that are all remote, and does that mean that they have to do that? And the answer is no, they don't. They continue in their remote. That was a family parent choice, and they can continue in their remote. But we must offer at least 2 days a week. So I asked myself what's next for the district? And we have an instructional meeting coming up on March 16th, and I would like to begin to discuss what it would look like in terms of bringing our students back. But I think there's a lot of caveats to it, and here's one that I think is really important. We believe that in April, our teachers will get their vaccines. Today, the commissioner told us that there's an effort to provide those vaccines at the school sites, very similar to how we do a flu clinic, where they come right into our school. They give out the flu shots to our staff. He is pushing for that to happen in our schools, which would be awesome, because that would really expedite the process of vaccinations. And so should that happen, and should we have our teachers vaccinated, and the numbers continue to drop like they are now. I think today, Donna told me that we had 52 cases in Concord today. Merrimack County is coming close to 200, which is a significant drop. So we're seeing, with the combination of people adhering to the rules, we're seeing the kind of decrease in numbers. And it gives me hope to bring the students back. The seniors didn't tell you how important it is for them to be together for their last month and a half, 6-7 weeks of school before they leave Concord High School and leave their experience. But I worry every day about our young kids. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of makeup to do. I worry about their math and their reading, their phonics, all of the comprehension, all of the things that are so critical to us. And we need to assess that. We need to get our youngsters into school, and we need to assess them. We need to know where they're at in their learning. Where's the loss? Where are the gaps? How do we get them back up on grade level? And I think that that's an important piece of the work. Should things continue to improve? I want to keep saying that. I'm not just saying let's get everybody back and not pay attention to anything. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if the conditions are appropriate for us to come back, our teachers are vaccinated, our numbers continue to drop significantly, and we continue to maintain the guidances that have been provided by CDC and the state of New Hampshire, then I think that I would like, if you would consider, I would like to speak to the instructional committee on March 16th to really address this. I have received a lot of emails of late. I have to tell you, I get a lot of letters recently, more supporting the notion of trying to get the children back to school. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. That hasn't always been the case, and you know that, right? There was a lot of people that felt we should stay remote and be in remote, and or just stay in hybrid. But this, I'm seeing more and more families really advocating for having the children come back to school before the end of the year, if that's possible. In the fall, I mean, we're planning bringing our students back, opening Concord School District and at full throttle come the fall. And I know that parents are concerned because, you know, they could have options, I suppose, to go to a private school or a parochial school or homeschool. But we are adamant in the planning of bringing our students back to school that I think is critically important, not only to their own learning, but to the entire economy of our country and all the family issues that go along with it. So it's kind of a little headway to what I'm thinking. And I want to close with, I'm kind of excited about this, and as many of you know, I serve as the commissioner for military kids for the state of New Hampshire. Former Governor Hassan asked me to do that, and I've continued to do it. And what it does is it services youngsters whose families are on active duty. And, you know, they really struggle, right? Some kids go to as many as 8 or 9 schools in their career because their families are deployed to various places. And so I've acted as the commissioner. We have about 700 to 800 students in New Hampshire that their parents are on active duty. Here's the other issue. We have over 7,000 students whose families are involved in the National Guard. And New Hampshire has a large contingent of National Guard. So with that, Concord High School was chosen to be one of 25 high schools in the state to be a Purple Star school. And so that will be funding to the high school to support our students who parents are on active duty and in the National Guard who are deployed. And we, as you know, New Hampshire deploys a lot of National Guard. Yeah. And so I'm pretty pleased about that, and I'm excited. I met with, we were on a Zoom call last week with the national folks, and Mrs. Peabody from the high school, the guidance counselor, sits on the state council for military kids as a school council of representatives, and she's going to help with the program at the high school. So I just wanted to share that. I was pretty excited about it. That's it, sir. That's my report.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that last part especially, and for all the other items that you updated us on. Are there any questions from the board members for the superintendent? Yeah. Mr. Parker.
Yeah, thank you very much for all of that and your intention to appropriately bring kids back in full. And I get a lot of comments from families that are looking for that. One just thought, and wondering if you've thought about this, is, you know, when kids lose out in schooling, or they have a medical leave, or they have any sort of break, when you come back to intervene, your model for intervention is a little different than just coming back to school. In other words, if you really want them to, focus, get their reading skills back up par, or other skills, to think about how you might be assessing that and prioritizing that as an instructional modality, instead of, and as well as, having them do all the stuff that we all love and think's important in their education. But I'm just wondering, as we bring them back, if we start to think about maybe, if you thought about that in terms of, you know what I mean, there's a difference between intervention, so to speak, and maintaining status quo. That's all.
Right. I think that one of the things we talked about was targeted interventions, and it has to be based on data, right?
Right.
And so one of the things, we have a number of tools that are used in the district, Ames Web, iReady, and there are other tools that we have at our disposal. And so I think we would do that, David, so that we could target the areas that they need to be addressed.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for that then.
I think one other point, the state is going to administer the state assessment, so we were told that today. There won't be any comparison data because we didn't do it last year, but it will be another data point. You know, I believe that you need multiple data points to assess students and to make sure that you put the right prescription together to remediate.
Right.
And so we'll use that, but it won't be the only tool we use.
Right. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Anyone else have questions for the superintendent this evening? Ms. Walsh?
Do you have any time frame on when you might be enrolling kids in summer school or summer camp? I think people, are planning those summer activities now, and how kids would be selected to go, or whether it be open to everyone?
Right. Well, we've already started to talk about the planning for what kinds of programs we would have. So we have to get out there. We know that. We need to get out no later than the end of the month because, people do plan for summer. Do the kids go to camp? Do I take a vacation? All of the things that impact families. So we want to be able to get out there as soon as we can and have enough flexible schedule. Now, the key is going to be for us, and we talked a little bit about this today, is the staff. I mean, the staff, and having them in over the summer, this has been an incredible year for our staff. They've been asked a lot. We've placed a lot of demands on them. They've risen to the occasion every time, but I do worry that they do need a break. They need a break. I know people say, oh, teachers don't work in the summer. Well, yes, they do. They're in professional development. They're doing their preparation. They do all their planning. I know Donna does a ton of curriculum work in the summer with our teachers. So one of the big areas that I'm worried about a little bit will be staff. But we've already begun to reach out to the local schools and universities to see who's available, who finished their student teaching, that kind of thing. So, but I would hope by the end of March, beginning of April, we'll know what the status is by the end of April with a goal of perhaps around May 1st to bring, May 1st is a Saturday. May 3rd, we'll bring the kids back, if that all works out. And again, I don't want to make any promises, and I know some people will disagree with this, but I just think we're ready.
And just to follow up, because I'm sure we'll hear, May 3rd, if students come back, there would still remain the remote option for families that are remote currently.
That's correct.
Thank you. Before all the calls.
Right. We would continue to have our remote class at all the grade levels, and we'll provide that just as we have all along.
Superintendent, when you say the May 3rd, are you talking about would there be sequential depending on which grades, or is it a big bang?
Well, I think it would be easier. I mean, not easier, that's not the right word, but I think it would be more organized and structured and careful planning if we brought them in groups, like we did a primary K2, and then we brought our intermediate 3 through 5, and then middle school, high school kind of thing.
So
I just think,
sort of.
But if I could, I might flip it so that I have seniors and first graders all coming in together. Our new learners and our seniors who are ready to leave us.
Thank you. Ms. Higgins?
That mirrors how we started hybrid. We didn't bring everyone back all at
That's
once.
right.
They came in. The only comment I'll make, and I'm sort of both supporting what you're saying and putting some onus on our shoulders, is in one of the many letters I've received, I was called out on if you want to win your race, you got to pick a race and train for it. You can't just wait around. And so the more specifics that you put in place for when these things happen, the more effectively the planning is done and the protocols are set in place because you have your race date. You have this much time to get in shape. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, but also it puts the call out to everyone involved in putting this together to train well, to do it right. So I'm just addressing both of those things.
Right, and I haven't, we're just starting these discussions, and I do need to talk to our Teachers Association, our Para Association, all the folks that participate in this planning, and it is planning. I want to be really clear about that, and it's planning based on the conditions, but I want them involved in it, and so I plan to meet with their leadership to be able to talk about that, because you're right, you've got to have a plan and you have to have, hard information for folks. It's a big decision, and I know it's a big decision for you, and but I thought, you know what, it's March, it's time to think about it. Ultimately, the instructional committee will make a recommendation and bring it to the board.
So as a track coach, I just want to see a good training plan.
Okay.
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 Do we have any other questions for the superintendent? All right, then. Thank you, Superintendent. Our next item is the EU Church of Concord donation. Who will be handling this particular details? Mr. Dunn?
I just wanted to include that. There's nothing you need to take action. Your real policy is 5,000 or more, but we want to try to recognize that when someone does make a donation, an organization like the Unitarian Church, that was for the Concord Schools Feed Families program, and that's just going into account that we'll use to satisfy any negative balances that we may have once school reopens. So that was all. Just wanted to acknowledge it.
No, and we do acknowledge them, and we appreciate their donation, and would like to recognize them here. Thank you, Mr. Dunn, for putting that on the agenda. And thank you to all the church members for your generous donation. At this point, we're at point 4.5, which is the motion to be made by Ms. West and Mr. Weinberg. Would you like, either one of you like to speak to this at this time?
Absolutely. So tomorrow at 9 a.m., tomorrow, Tuesday, March 2nd, there will be the hearing for Senate Bill 130, which is essentially another iteration of House Bill 20, which this board already expressed opposition to. So the motion that we'd like to put forth is for us to agree to this statement of, as we said last month, the Concord School Board stands against any attempt to dismantle our public education system. Senate Bill 130, also known as the Education Freedom Act account, is an additional attempt to undermine public education. Consequently, we, the Concord School Board, strongly oppose this legislation and urge the New Hampshire Senate Education Committee to vote Senate Bill 130 as inexpedient to legislate. Additionally, we encourage all members of the public to register their opposition to this bill.
Okay, motion was made by Ms. West that the Concord School Board would endorse the statement as she has read it. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Ms. Higgins seconds. Is there discussion? Mr. Weinberg.
I would just like to add, I know this is the second statement that we have done, but I think sometimes it can be overlooked, like the power of this collective body, and that we are representing public education, and I think it's important for our collective voices to be heard, as well as constituency. It's important for your voices to be heard as well.
Other comment? Ms. Cannon, go ahead.
So I guess I'm going to offer an unpopular comment. I have an issue with coming to the board meeting and having something dropped in front of me and said, we're going to vote on this later today. None of the this is a very complicated issue. There are both sides to consider. I am very clear about how I feel about Senate Bill 130. There are people who feel equally passionate who are on the other side of the vote. I may not be the only one, but I like to think about the repercussions of motions, the repercussions of the actions that we're taking as a board as a whole, and I am concerned with not having the time to really think about, for example, what the school board taking a position about asking members of the community to vote one way or another. I'm not sure that doing that as something that was just presented right before the board meeting is something I'm particularly comfortable about. I would like to ask the entire board that if we're going to do something like this, that it make it through the appropriate protocol to get on the agenda so that it can be in our board packet, so that we can read it ahead of time, so that we can consider it and give it sort of due weight and consideration. That has nothing to do with the actual motion or the bill. That's not a commentary on either of those, just on the sort of timing of, boom, we're going to do this.
Thank you, Ms. Cannon. Mr. Parker, and then Mr. Weinberg.
I agree with Gina for another reason, is that we haven't had a chance to read the bill. Again, it's presented to us right now. We know many of us are not in favor of it, but we haven't had a chance, as she said, to read it and discuss it. That's why we have an agenda, and that's why we have minutes. And it is asking a lot of us on the night, to make that decision. I don't like the protocol, and you've done this before. I just don't like that protocol, and I will not vote in favor of, not because of the meaning of the bill, but because the protocol I don't think is a good precedent to be setting. So,
Mr. Parker, thank you. Mr. Weinberg?
No, definitely, and I think those are valid concerns. One of the problems that arises with the legislative calendar is how volatile it is and how it changes so rapidly, and how it can change at any moment of the time. We could also provide an amendment to this motion to remove the last statement, in which we encourage members of the public, so it is solely on behalf of the board, if that makes members feel more comfortable as well. And someone could provide that amendment if they would like.
Other points of discussion? Ms. West.
I just also would like to say that I do agree about the process, and hope that we do find a way to create a system where we do have the collective decision to involve ourselves in these decisions together. I'm not. Yeah, I essentially am saying that I do agree with the process issue, but I'm not sure how to solve the problem.
Yes, Mr. Parker.
Yeah, thank you for that. And by the way, I really like the initiatives that you're taking. I don't want to misconstrue that. Again, the challenge is, as you say, it's going to be voted on tomorrow, right? In the Senate, right? I think. Yeah. And so time is of the essence. It still has to go through joint committee, joint resolution, correct? Before it would become, so we still have a period of time that we could comment on it after reading it and after, would it need to be a month?
Unless there is at any full board meeting, we could do this. So if we have a board meeting prior to the month, it can be put onto that agenda, I believe,
we do have a number of meetings coming up. If we were given some time, it's not complete. It would not completely pass tomorrow. It still has to you still have to, I believe, right, work it between the House and the Senate? Is that true? Right, so we would have time if this is presented and put on the minutes. And if you could, get in touch with Jim. I mean, I'm trying to problem solve here at the board, and maybe this isn't the
If it
place,
doesn't
but
pass.
I'm trying to support.
So maybe
Superintendent, do you have?
could I offer a little bit of help here?
You certainly may.
David is right. I mean, the Senate, even if the Senate votes on it and votes in the affirmative, it will still need to have crossover to the House so that there's, agreement. So I think that we probably do have time. And you do have a number of meetings coming up. I'm sure you saw your March calendar, right? And so we could add that to an agenda item on our deliberations. That won't help for tomorrow for the hearing, but you have obviously the freedom to speak as an individual citizen at those meetings to air your own personal. You can't speak for the board, but it will be a process before a bill like that lands on the governor's desk for signature.
Can I make a suggestion, because that we table this, because rather than take a vote on it tonight, because I
can make the motion to table.
I would move to table it, but maybe you want to vote first. I mean,
well, if you make the motion to table,
I would move to table it.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion to table this bill, or this motion at this time, rather? Do we have a second to that motion? I will second it because I think it's worth a vote. With it being seconded, the tabling motion takes precedence. Discussion with regards to tabling. Any additional discussion? Ms. Cannon.
I think the only thing that we need to do if we're going to table it is I think we need to be very intentional about when it comes back off the table for discussion and vote.
We may table, we may table this, or we may postpone it and actually set a date. Right now, the motion is to table it. So, but it can be put on an agenda in any of our future meetings.
Despite the fact that I'm the secretary, I'm not an expert at parliamentarianism. Does that mean that we have to vote on the motion to table the motion, and then we would redo a motion for postpone?
No, we would table it. Actually, the motion right there right now is to table the bill. If the motion passes, it's tabled. It remains on the table, and any one of these members can vote, can make a motion.
Okay, so we don't have to.
The table.
We don't have to then move that it be postponed.
No, you could bring it off the table in any of our future meetings, and that would be another motion to bring this off the table for consideration. Okay. I'm not a parliamentary expert either, but I know that much. So.
Okay.
So we have any other discussion with regards to the motion to table the bill? With that, we would take a vote on the motion to table first. All those in favor of tabling the bill, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Okay, so
I think the ayes have it, but if someone would wish to call a roll call, we could do that.
I think we should probably.
Okay, the request has been for a roll call vote on this motion to table.
So,
Ms. Cannon, will you call that roll?
I will. Ms. Higgins?
Aye.
Okay, sorry, I just have to figure out how I'm going to take notes. Ms. Smith?
Nay.
Mr. Parker?
Yay. Aye.
Ms. West?
Nay.
Mr. Weinberg?
Nay.
Ms. Walsh?
Nay.
Ms. Hastings?
Aye.
Mr. Richards?
Aye.
And I vote aye, which leaves 5 aye, 4 no.
So the motion to table carries. This motion is placed on the table. indefinitely until brought back. And that can be at any of our full board meetings in the future. Okay, thank you. At this point, we are at public comment. Mr. Dunn, are we set up for this? Are we in? Yeah. Yep. We're ready to go? Yep. Okay, I will remind this is a public comment session for agenda items only. Items that are currently on our agenda for tonight's meeting are we certainly want and encourage comment on. We ask everyone to please abide by our policy with regards to public comments. Public comments should be 5 minutes or less, and we do insist that everyone is respectful and civil with regards to their comments, as always. And with that, I will open it up to public comment within the auditorium first. Is there anyone here for public comment? Please come down. I'd ask you to state your name when you come down into the mic. Please speak into the microphone so that we can we know who you are. We can hear.
Hi, I have to stand under the light because I forgot my reading glasses. I'm Maureen O'Brien Adams. I have 2 high school kids, and I'm not a stranger to these meetings, and I come for the same reason every time, and I'm just going to reiterate Superintendent Murphy's comments earlier, and I applaud her comments about getting kids back in school. So that's what I'd like to talk about really quickly. I just read something from the CDC that was posted in January, a scientific study looking very closely at the effect of schools that did reopen. They did not show any appreciative increase in COVID in the communities that were open all around the country. My concern is, the benefit versus risk. I work in science, in hospitals. I see COVID patients every day that I work. I think that there's a huge fear of COVID. I think the ultimate fear is death. And I would like to state statistics for our state that I looked at today. Deaths from people aged 0 to 9, 0. Ages 10 to 19, 0 in the state of New Hampshire. Ages 20 to 29, 1. Ages 30 to 39, 5. Ages 40 to 49, 9. That's a total of 15 in the entire state up to age 49. I didn't write down the ones above that because most of the people in schools, except for me, a few of us are, older than that in schools. So I really think the risk versus benefit of opening schools, for me, is very apparent coming from a scientific background. The benefit is maybe less positive cases, but if we're worried about death, 0 students have died in the state of New Hampshire up to the age high school, and probably very, very few students and administrative people. People at high risk are already pretty isolated. But I really would like to just run through as quick as I can what I think are drawbacks or the risks. Well, it's risk versus benefit, but here's what we're risking by not letting kids go to school. First of all, just with a few months of Wednesdays of no school, I still don't know why we don't have school on Wednesdays. Kids have missed an entire month of school if you count up all the Wednesdays since the beginning of the year. If you count the other 2 cohort days that they didn't meet at all, that's another couple months. Can you imagine what these kids could have learned in several months that they had no instruction whatsoever? That doesn't even include last spring. Really wish I had my reading glasses. Here's what I think we're risking by not sending kids back to school. Emotional health, isolation, depression, all statistics in the state of New Hampshire, you can look them up. Increase in drug use, increase in alcohol use, increase in suicide ideation, suicide attempts, and suicides. Physical health. I talked to a chiropractor today who said he's skyrocketing kids coming in from doing teaching at home, sitting down all day. Increase in childhood obesity. We're missing what is really driving me nuts is essential character building of my children that is only learned and earned and developed in a school setting. mostly from teachers. Thank God for Mr. Reardon, because he has saved my daughter. I'll just say that. Kids are missing life-affirming events, life-affirming events. Thank God these kids are trying to have a prom and they deserve a prom, things like that. They're missing field trips. They're missing all kinds of things, you know, Model UN, labs. My daughter's chemistry teacher is teaching from home. I went into science because of my chemistry and biology teacher in high school, because of the hands-on labs we had. I can't even imagine what we're not giving our kids by keeping him out of schools. It's almost criminal in my mind. Lack of friendships, lack of social interaction. Critical relationships with teachers that cannot be had on a screen. Family stress. I can't even tell you how difficult it is to be in my house with one kid doing schoolwork in one room and one in the other, and I can't talk because they're in class. Not even to mention just the stress, it's astronomical that comes with having kids trying to do work at home. Lack of motivation, loss of motivation, and for some kids, it can be permanent. Will forever change their trajectory for a potential career. Lack of support from school services. Kids can't walk by in and out of a counselor's office anymore. I had kids that used that service. Hasn't happened since a year, since we went remote, because they don't have that same opportunity. It's just not the same. They're going to be less prepared for higher education, not prepared for SATs. I'm paying to get private SAT prep classes, and I don't want to hear that colleges don't care about it, because I've been spending over a year looking at colleges, and they do want SATs, especially international schools. They do want SAT scores. They do want GPAs. So let's not fool ourselves, please. The other issue is, I have more, but it doesn't matter. You get the idea. There was an email that came out recently about kids being resilient, and I totally disagree with that. I work in healthcare. I see more kids in extremely heartbreaking situations on a daily basis, and I have 3 kids. They're not resilient, and I think that that's something we as parents and educators tell ourselves to cover for things that we're not doing right. And I ask you, as a parent and as a person who's trying to send 2 people out in the community, and obviously I might be speaking for 1,600 other parents, I'm really disappointed at the lack of parental involvement in these meetings. Maybe there are a lot of people zooming in, and I hope so. But it is very important that we do look at the data. If you want to look at the science and look at the data, there's no reason with the proper mitigation procedures and everything else that our kids should not be in school. And what really bothers me is that it's all just in your hands, just the people in this room that are deciding the future of all of these kids and keeping them in or out of school. So please, I really implore you to send these kids back to school full time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the auditorium that would like to speak at this time on agenda items? Mr. Dunn, do we have anyone remote that would like to speak at this time?
Sure, one second. Beth Richards, if you could unmute yourself, go ahead and state your name, where you're from, and you can put your hand down. Thank you.
Hi, it's Beth Richards, and I'm actually wearing my representative hat at the moment regarding the earlier conversation on Senate Bill 130. And I spent the day in hearings, and I wanted to provide the public and the members of the board a little bit of information of a new rule that the chair of my committee provided us, that now, and this is in regards to the House, and I do know that the body on the other side of the wall, as we refer to it, operates somewhat differently. But I encourage everyone to please use the General Court website to post your position, but do it by 8 a.m. The chairs of some committees are asking for that at before, so that they're not having things happen at the same time. So that's what happened on the House. So as you move forward in this process, that timing may be important for you to know.
Thank you, Representative.
You're welcome.
Do we have anyone else?
Currently, I do not. No one else has their hand raised. But if you would like to speak, go ahead and raise your hand. And this is on agenda items, and I will call on you. Oh, there we go. Ms. Kashi. Okay, Ms. Kashi, if you would please unmute yourself. Go ahead and state your full name, where you're from, and go ahead and lower your hand. You can speak. Thanks.
Sure. So I'm Samaya Kashi. I'm one of the teachers at Runlit, and I just hearing about wanting schools to be open fully, and I, as a teacher, I have to say I would love that. I would love to be in school every single day. But as somebody, and I'm going to share this with all of you, I did end up getting COVID, even though I was completely remote during this entire school year. Up until December, basically, I was remote. My son, the only person in our household that was in public was my 9-year-old son, who we allowed hybrid twice a week, ended up bringing home COVID to the rest of us. So, but there's really no way of proving it. It was, you know, so by the time we found out, we all had COVID in our household. We are still dealing with the complications of that medically in my home. My husband has long-term lung problems because of it. And this isn't just me, this is multiple coworkers of mine are having long-term issues due to COVID. So this idea that the kids are safe going back 100%, well, we're adults in the building as well, and we're human beings who have our own families and a whole slew of issues. It's not as simple as wanting, you know, I would love to have the kids, including my own children. I am a parent in this school district. I want my kids every day at school, believe me. But is it worth the health of the adults who are in those buildings and all those parents who are home when their children are bringing them home and giving it to them and their grandparents? So while the death rate might be 0 for 9-year-olds, and actually my son had no symptoms whatsoever, but myself and my husband were deathly ill, and my daughter was pretty sick too, and she's in middle school. So it's not as simple as what the previous person was talking about. We can go through 1 year and be careful, and then hopefully next year when everyone's vaccinated, we can send kids back 100%. But it's not worth the risk of adult life. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Kashi.
Thank you.
We appreciate your comments. Mr. Dunn, do we have anyone else who is waiting to make a comment on agenda items?
So far, no.
Actually, you will have an opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting. And we have, once again, another non-public, or a public comment session at the end of the meeting. Any other comments at this time?
So far, no. Not that I see.
Okay. Then please save your comment until the next public comment session. And let's see, Superintendent, let's move on. Mr. Prince, are you going to be speaking with regards to personnel? I am. Thank you.
I have coaching nominations for you tonight. We have one new spring coach that is before you, Stephanie Oberg. She's being recommended as a Concord High assistant track coach, and she's on a step 1 with a stipend of $2,699. I don't know if you want to do these.
Okay. We could do them individually, Mr. Prince. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the nomination of Stephanie Oberg for the track coach position?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Higgins. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Parker. All those in, is there any discussion with regards to this nomination? Not seeing any. I will call it as a vote. All those in favor of the motion, vote by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Prince. The recommendation passes.
Thank you. And then the next sheet in your packet is the Excel sheet that includes all of our returning coaches for the spring season. And you'll see there are some that remain to be filled, the TBAs, and Ms. Oberg is highlighted as she was new. So I would bring before you these nominations of returning coaches to be approved for the spring season.
Okay.
You're not doing the football?
Yeah, Mr. Prince, right now, the next page in our packet actually is a varsity football coach. Do you
I'm
want to
sorry,
cover that next, or
is
do you
there-
want to?
Well, either one. I mean,
The
that's what
page
this-
after that is the spring nominations.
Let's, if you don't mind, let's do spring, and then we can take care of the fall one.
I
That's
see, 'cause
separate.
that's fine.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So actually, the following page after the varsity football coaches are the listing of the spring nominations.
Okay.
I'll let everybody take a look at that at this point, but do I have a recommendation or a motion to approve the spring coaching nominations as presented?
So moved.
Jonathan moved it.
Okay, moved by Mr. Weinberg. Sorry, Linda, I want to make sure you get this. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Hastings. Is there any discussion with regards to the spring nominations? Not seeing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Your nominations pass. The nominations for spring coaches now.
Thank you. And we do have one fall coach nomination. Jim Corkum is the varsity head football coach at Concord High. This is for a stipend of $8,547. There is an asterisk there because we are negotiating with the CEA at the moment, and the rate for stipends is based on the B1 rate. So right now, today, that is this year's rate. If we get a new agreement with a different amount, then his stipend would be moved accordingly. But we would like to move forward. Mr. Mello has said that Mr. Corcoran is already reviewing game film and trying to get prepared as they work toward the fall football season. So he's asked us that we bring his nomination forward, and I would ask that you approve that nomination.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the nomination for the Concord High School varsity football coach? Moved by Ms. Walsh. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Higgins.
He
Is there
clearly
any,
wants no free time.
is there any discussion? Not seeing any discussion from the board. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All any opposed? Any abstentions? The nomination is approved. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Prince. We appreciate that. Next up is the start of our committee reports. First would be the instructional committee meeting of February 9th. Ms. Higgins, will you be handling this for us
I will.
today? Thank you.
So we had our instructional committee meeting was really a sort of a chance for people to fill in the instructional committee on the status of certain things at that time. We were approaching returning to hybrid and having a dual hybrid, in-person remote situation. So we received a lot of good information that night. So I'll go through those things. So the first thing was technology updates. This was a big issue around a lot of staff and the ability to teach a classroom and children at home. And our administrators were very, very clear that none of these technology pieces and things were forced on any teacher, that they really tried to respond to the needs of the teachers and what they wanted in their classrooms. We talked a lot about how different each building is with what teachers have at hand. Smart boards and boards in the elementary schools can act as a second screen, for instance, and those kinds of things. We were able at that time to provide teachers that wanted it with what they needed, and lots of things were in the process of being delivered and ordered. And lots of the cost around this technology is covered by COVID funds, so that was a relief to everybody. We talked about some enrollment data, specifically students that we lost this year as students in our district. So 198 total students from last year to this year were not here strictly because of COVID issues. And of those roughly 200 students, 45% are planning to return. 26% no, and then 28% not sure. So we still have roughly half that number, at least at the time of this meeting, on the fence, either not coming back around the fence for next year, which can make planning tricky. But I think as time goes along, those numbers will become more clear to the board. At the time of the meeting, Superintendent Murphy gave COVID updates for us. CDC guidelines were reviewed for in-person learning. With the safety protocol required, Concord couldn't really, at that time, do more than hybrid because we don't have building size that would allow for full enrollment with 6-foot distancing and those kinds of things. So that conversation, again, that's a conversation that changes day to day. So I'm sure at our next meeting, our updates will look a bit different. So we reviewed what was happening. So in returning, so this was just before our students returned, or at the time of their return. So elementary school students are the same, 2 days of instruction, 2 days of asynchronous learning, and Wednesday as that flex day. Middle and high school became 4 days of learning, whether in the building or at home, so that they were connected to their teachers and their classwork 4 days a week. With every decision we've made this year, there's positives and negatives around how that's going and unfolding. Our building administrators at Runlet and Concord High were very, very forthcoming with addressing concerns, talking about steps being taken to make sure that children and staff felt safe and that protocols were being followed. This is an ongoing daily task that we all hear about from teachers and administrators. There was a bit of a discussion around certain students being able to come into the building every day. Our at-risk students, special needs students, ELL students are able to come on a daily basis. And there have been an increasing number of requests, not surprisingly, for other students to come. And this can sometimes require sort of cross-cohort, placing of students and that sort of thing. And all of those things are sort of on an ongoing, case-by-case basis on making these decisions and how to make it work and where to place these students in the building should they be coming 4 days a week. In terms of next steps, Superintendent Murphy addressed those tonight. We'll look at how can we potentially get students in the building every day before the school year is over, how that might look. And in easing in our students, it was brought up that that might be unfair. If you're a first grade mother, yay, your kid's in school 4 days, 5 days a week, and if you're a fifth grade mother, no, they're not, and how that might be to our families. But again, this is a piece of the puzzle that I think over the next 4 to 6 weeks will be addressed pretty closely. And that was that. We talked a little bit about summer and fall, but again, a month later, we have a lot more information on those things as well. And if anyone else remembers anything that I left out, please feel free to speak up.
No, there is no action for the board coming from this meeting. Thank you, Ms. Higgins. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Yes, Ms. Cannon.
The only question I have is, was anything discussed about the CPACs at the instructional committee?
CPAC.
Where are we?
The special ed. Bob Belmont.
Okay.
Okay. All right. At this time, we'll move on to the Communications and Policy Committee. Ms. Cannon.
So So the Communication and Policy Committee held a meeting on, got to get the date.
February 16th.
February 16th. And the primary purpose of the meeting on that date was to get community and parent input on the transgender and gender nonconforming policy, to make sure that the people that it affected foremost had a chance to be heard about that policy and the language of the policy and how various parts of the policy would affect them directly. We had some great suggestions on the that were made by our community members and our parents on some of the language, which I thought was outstanding. We then took those suggestions and we sort of folded them into the policy, and then we sent the policy to our council to make sure that we were not running afoul of any of the laws and any of the current pending litigation around the country on this very issue. He suggested some significant rewriting, not of the substance, but of the choice of language that we were using to make it clearer and I think more user-friendly and more in line with other policies from other school districts around the country. We then moved to the pregnant student policy, which has been, or had been, oh, sorry, before we leave the transgender students and gender nonconforming, the committee recommended to pass to the board for a first reading that policy for this evening. So that's an important piece I didn't want to forget. The student pregnancy policy, again, has gone through substantial revisions as we get closer and closer to submitting it to the board for reading. And I think it's come a long way in providing support and positive language to help support our students that are going through, whether they be new mothers or new fathers who are going through this whole process while they try to continue to be students, and how to do both of those successfully. The committee also voted to bring that policy to the board for a first reading. Although we didn't discuss it at the Communications and Policy Committee, it is also appropriate that the designated volunteer policy, which has already been for a first reading before the board, come before the board as a second reading tonight. So Karen Fisher-Anderson, who was instrumental in helping draft and helping lead us through a potential quagmire of policy writing and getting bogged down. Did I miss anything? Is there anything you'd like to add? Is there?
Thanks, Gina. No, I think you covered it. I'd be happy if you need me to speak briefly to a couple of the recommendations made by our General Counsel, Dean Eckert, just to give you a flavor. But Gina's absolutely correct in that he changed some of the language to make it more consistent. He did pull one piece of language out of the transgender, dealing with, and I can pull it up right now, the suggested removal had to do with, bear with me, I apologize. Glasses. Do you see them on? Oh, here they are. Can't see to see my glasses. Sorry. Let's see. Because there's an ongoing case that's not in New Hampshire, but basically dealing with plans that we talked about putting into place to assist transgender students along with their parents, we had put in language there that when we went to talk to the parents that we would refer to the child, the student that is, by their birth name unless otherwise directed by the parent and or the student. The feedback I got from Dean Eckert was, it's not essential to your policy, therefore, because it's under litigation in another jurisdiction outside of New Hampshire, recommend you remove that one sentence so that we don't set ourselves up to be part of that litigation. We can go back and change it down the road if we need to, but basically making it pretty clear that we do not keep confidences from parents who are instrumental in their child's education with regard to their transgender status. We will always try and facilitate a discussion, but we'd have to be very, very careful about withholding that kind of information unless we had an exceptional case, in which case we'd be going right back to Dean Eckert. But Gina, no, I think you summarized it very well. A lot of what I would call puppies to dogs and witches to that, but in a legal sense with regard to transgender.
So Jim, I don't know what the procedure is because I'm still new to the board. For now that we have a second reading for the, sorry, I should speak closer. Now that we're doing a second reading for the designated volunteer policy, which is 890, what do we do after that? Do we vote on whether we accept it or not?
Yes, and thank you, Gina, for summarizing the meeting. We have two policies that are included in your board book and are available for anyone to read with regards to on our website that are presented for first reading, policy 528, pregnant students, and policy 162, transgender and gender nonconforming students. I encourage the board to, this is our first reading, you hopefully have a chance to take a look at it. You may ask any questions and propose any changes. We will have a second reading at our next monthly board meeting in April. And for policy 890, designated volunteers, this is the second reading. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to read it and to think of any changes, additions, or deletions or amendments they want to put into that, because at this point I will make a motion for the board to accept policy number 890, designated volunteers, as presented. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Linda's motion was made by myself, Jim, seconded by Ms. Cannon. Discussion with regards to the designated volunteers policy. Is there anyone have discussion with regards to that or questions? Not seeing any. I will call a vote for the motion to approve policy number 890, designated volunteers. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Policy number 890, as presented, is approved. I guess I have a question for the superintendent or for Ms. Fisher-Anderson. The transgender and gender nonconforming students policy and the pregnant student policy, as presented in our board book, does that include the attorney's corrections or not?
No, sir, they do not. We decided to bring forward the one that was approved by the committee for the first reading. And then secondarily to that, I believe the committee members were all provided with copies of the latest edition of the policies with the green highlights and everything that Attorney Eckert provided for feedback for your review.
That's fine. However, when we come to the second reading of those policies, we will need to publish the changes that are being proposed in that, which I assume will be proposed by a board member. We will have our discussion with regard to those changes or deletions at that second reading.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Weinberg, you have a question?
More comments for the policy. Under Section 3 guidance under subtopic A, privacy. I think this probably
Which policy are you talking about?
the transgender and gender nonconforming. Sorry about that, just finding exactly where. On the bottom on page 73, this might fall under what Dean Eckhart was talking about, where it says school personnel should use the student's legal name and the pronoun corresponding unless the student, parent, or guardian. I was just going to say I recommend it being only the student because of just differences.
That is the one that was removed.
Okay.
If you're dealing with a sentence that says, when contacting the parent or guardian of a transgender or gender nonconforming student, yes.
Exactly.
That's the one, as I said, that is currently being tracked. There was an injunctive relief. Yes, you're absolutely right. That's the one we are recommending be removed until we know the state of the law down the road.
Amazing, thank you. And sorry, one other under. Same section, Section 3 guidance, but Article C this time for names and pronouns.
Yes.
We use a lot of gendered language, like his or her gender identity. I would recommend switching that to like their as a third person, gender neutral.
Check.
And that's the same with Articles D and F. And yes, I believe so.
D and F. Yep, absolutely. In fact, you've read his mind. All of them, he or she have been changed back to there.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. And as Mr. Richards has asked, I'll make sure this gets out to the rest of the full board quickly so that you can, as I said, take a look at his input.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, the reason why we didn't have the modified version in the packet was that the motion in the committee was to send the version we had in front of us at that time to the board. We didn't feel it was appropriate to kind of do a switch between what we agreed to send to the board and then what you guys saw being something different. So,
Any other questions? Yes, Ms. West.
I just have a question about the section that says individuals' actual or perceived sexual orientation.
Which section are you under? I'm sorry.
It's at the. It just said it's one of the first. Under definitions, it's the last of the definitions. It says sexual orientation describes a person's romantic or sexual attraction. Sexual orientation is different, not the same as gender identity. The last sentence is, in this policy, sexual orientation refers to an individual's actual or perceived, in quotations,
correct,
sexual orientation.
Mm-hmm.
I would like some elaboration on perceived and also that I didn't see sexual orientation in the rest of the policy.
Actual or perceived. Okay, with regard to actual or perceived, actual would be the birth sex would be right now.
Oh, I apologize. I guess I understand it, but I don't understand its purpose in the policy.
Well, it's just to further describe what the definition of sexual orientation is.
So I would recommend, I guess the word perceived is what bothers me in that definition, because somebody's perception of your sexual orientation does not have any bearing on your sexual orientation, and the reason I even asked about it again is because it's not a definition that's necessary for this policy because it has no bearing on gender identity.
Well, I think that perceive speaks to that individual's presentation, if you will.
Their own perception, not an outward perception?
Well, that's going to be determined by some other factors, but in this particular section, it's the sex at birth and then what they either present themselves as or are perceived as.
Definition's the very last part.
So again, I would recommend removing just that last section, that last sentence in this policy. Sexual orientation refers to an individual's actual or perceived sexual orientation.
If we could, I think down the road we may have, and Kate, I get it, we may have a little bit of input when it comes to public comment tonight, and maybe that'll help answer that. If we could just allow that to happen. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if they want to speak to that, we may have somebody who wishes to. But I'll certainly put that in the queue for consideration.
Okay.
Pamela?
We can, that is a point and during this first reading. And certainly, Ms. West, if you want to, on our second reading, make that change, you certainly can. We can propose that as a change upon our second reading. Thank you, Ms. Fisher-Anderson, for clarifying what it is in here. However, we have the right to make that change as a board on second reading. So I would ask you to hold that, and as we bring this up next meeting and we want to approve it, you can amend it at that point, and we would vote on the change in wording.
Okay, in between now and then, I'll go back and get additional guidance on that as well, just to be sure I'm giving you the accurate interpretation.
Thank you.
Sure. Pamela, I thought I saw.
More of a comment or a request that these proposed policies be posted on the website in a way that is accessible for the public. It's really hard to get to these things, and the bottom after 12 meeting minutes, when if people want to share them or look at them, to just pull up one policy instead of saying go to page 73 of the board book. So that's just a request to make it a little more accessible to the public. I had a question on the pregnant student policy. I'm sure you're stunned. The language about staff members should not promise that information will remain confidential. Will students be informed proactively that guidance counselors and nurses will not necessarily keep their medical information confidential?
This policy, once it's approved, will be one of the ones that will go into the student parent handbook at that point. And as part of our training, one of the things we will always do is, we're not trying to trap the kids. We want to put them on notice that there are obligations. And so, as they're coming in and they're starting to discuss things, we made clear to the student that there are certain reporting obligations, and I have something to go back to you with on. You had asked for some guidance on the reporting to DCYF if the student was under the age of 16. You had wanted some authority, so I went back to DCYF, and there's a policy directive. It's 17 Tax 67, and it is pretty current. It was last updated in 2017, and in the back of the policy guidance, it makes it very clear that I can just give you one line. It says that any child or youth under the age of 16 is not able to consent and should be reported for concerns of sexual abuse if they have had any sexual contact. We have a little more discretion if the student is between the age of 16 and 18. The only reason that we might have to report out to a social agency, that is DCYF in that case, is if through the conversation there was some belief that there was maybe incest or coercion, force, human trafficking, then the principal and the guidance counselor and or the nurse would get together and make a determination on whether they felt they needed to report in that instance. But we do have to report under 16. Go ahead.
And in what other policies, either student or faculty, do we advise teachers of their obligation to report if they have knowledge? Is it only pregnant students?
No, abuse and neglect. There's a mandatory reporting requirement there.
Do we inform teachers that if they are aware of students engaging in sexual intercourse, they need to report that to DCYF, or is that only in the pregnant student policy?
No, it's not just in the pregnant student policy. If a teacher is aware of a student under the age of 16 having sex, even with another student under the age of 16, there is a reporting requirement there by law.
And teachers are aware of that outside the pregnant student policy?
They should be. If they're not, they will be as part of our training. If this pregnant policy gets adopted, that will be part of the training.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I just ask my fellow board member some clarification? with regards to, and I very much appreciate the effort it takes to dig through the minutes. Do you have a suggestion as to where we would want to put it on the webpage? I've called it up. Would you want to put it in the school board section under a special heading, or on the actual pending policies or so on the landing page? Do you have a suggestion, or are we just leaving it to?
I would probably leave it to the administration to figure out where it would best go. I might put it under school board agendas, and then break it out a little more, or have a draft policies thing. I think people, it's hard to share and look at.
Perhaps if we just added the third line onto that. So, Superintendent, perhaps if, when we're looking at the monthly board agenda packet page, it says right now it says March 1, 2021 draft agenda, March 1, 2021 board book. You could put another line there that says proposed policies or policies for reading, and then people would be able to go to that directly. I think that's not a difficult thing to do. And if that would be possible, I certainly think it would make it easier for the general public to find the policy.
Can we ask Lyndon, just because I'm sure if anything like this is being done, she'd be able to tell us. Lyndon, did you hear the question? Are you still there?
Yes, and it's completely easy to do, and I'm happy to do it.
Great.
And I will confer with Karen Fisher-Anderson about exactly what versions need to be posted at this point and how they'll be marked up.
Yeah.
And we'll put it exactly where you suggested, Jim.
Thank you, Lyndon. You're always professional and always a help. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, that covers, okay. Mr. Weinberg.
Thank you for answering all the questions and comments. Under Section J, back on the transgender and gender nonconforming, which is page 75, in the middle of the second paragraph, there's a sentence that says, if the student has an IEP or a 504 plan, the provisions of those plans will be considered when addressing transgender issues. I think we should try to rework that sentence, just the way that the onus sounds of like.
Do you have, and I'm not trying to say, okay, how would you change it? Do you have a recommendation on what you think might be softer that you'd like to see?
I was thinking about that. Possibly finding a way that will address problems when they arise, analyzing something of that sort, just not insinuating that the student's transgender status is an issue, I think is an important thing to consider. But no, I do not have anything off the top of my head. Okay. And then under Section K, discrimination and harassment, there's pretty good consistency throughout here, and I know this is just the first reading with saying transgender and gender nonconforming, but in the second sentence, it only says or violence based on the student's transgender status. I would just add and gender nonconforming status.
Okay.
There was
one of the, and I apologize that you can't see it in front of you right now, but one of the changes that Dean Eckert recommended was that we want to be really careful. I had separated out transgender, gender nonconforming students, and his feedback was that the policy tends to treat transgender students in a manner, you want it to be consistent with the way that we treat all students and not just transgender nonconforming, so that's a really good point. So what I'm going to do, and what he did, is go back and the references to transgender and any gender nonconforming were changed to all students, so that we are not accused of any disparate treatment between students who may be transgender and a student that's not. So, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Yes, Ms. West.
Right. I do have a question about the gender segregated activities, and which is Section D. I'm not actually sure necessarily. Do we segregate health education class by gender?
I believe that we do. No, we don't, Donna. No. I think, though, that one of the issues from talking to the kids, the students, has been that, unfortunately, in the curriculum, when we're talking in health class, they address, like, say, sexual activities, that they address them for students who are considered, heterosexual, if you will. There's no further conversation or education with regard to those students who may be that or non-conforming, gender non-conforming. So that is one where, that it's a curriculum issue that we, again, want to, once we get the policy set, what we want to do is then dig down deeper within the school and come up with the processes, if you will, the more specific but consistent processes across the schools, because our policies won't address every single circumstance, but we certainly want to provide enough guidance that we're consistent and we can provide, enough meat on the bones for our staff.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
I suppose what I'm thinking is that, it's specifically in the instance of health class, this says, a student should be included in the group that corresponds with their gender identity. But more so, I think, if particularly in that situation, it would be wherever the student feels more comfortable and not necessarily have it.
Go ahead, Barb.
Especially if it's a health class I'm not sure why a health class would be segregated.
So I taught health for 7 years in this very building, and I don't know that it's changed. We didn't segregate students by gender ever, no matter what whether it was our depression unit or our how not to have a baby in 10th grade unit. The students learned those things together. The only time I think students might be separated would be in elementary school when they're learning body function type things, but I don't even know that that's separate anymore. If they aren't, do we need to have that in our policy?
It's actually not in the policy that has been redlined by Dean.
Okay. Right. They say he struck out such as for health education classes, but there could be other instances. And again, I would hope that we'll get some public comment on that, maybe from the students themselves, if this is happening, what kind of examples they can provide. And again, that will be something I'll take back to provide a little bit more meat on the bones to you, Kit, on that. See if I can come up with other instances where there may be segregated activities.
Well, the only place that we know of that we're aware of the segregated health activities would be in the 5th grade when they're introducing sexuality issues. There is and has been practice where you separate the boys and girls. I see Brenda shaking her head, and she knows that in 5th grade. It's early in their development, and it's a tough topic to talk. So the folks that are teaching that often segregate the boys and girls at that time. That's the only time we know that there's a segregation. I'll leave it to Brenda. She probably knows more than I do.
No, never. It was my experience, though, that when issues regarding identity came up as early as that grade, it was very thoughtfully taken, there was a lot of thought and care that went into making sure that the student was comfortable, that the family was comfortable, and that the staff was comfortable, and it was taken care of on an individual basis so that everyone's comfort level was considered in making those decisions. And it did come up in 5th grade.
Jonathan, to your point on the IEP or the 504, one of the changes was if the student has an IEP or a 504 plan, the provisions of those plans will be considered when addressing matters related to gender identity. So it became a little more generic, but your point is still, you don't want to make it singled out as if it's a problem of some kind?
I think that sounds better than, I think that sounds better.
Okay.
Also, Mr. Rich, if I could make a quick comment. Thank you for also bringing up the idea of what kind of health class curriculum is and kind of reflection. And I just wonder if we should also consider the instructional committee possibly trying to find, doing a cohesive plan in addition to oversee what we're teaching, and if the current policies can, or even just curriculum can be more reflective of students' body, students' identities and such.
As a health educator, I'm all over it, so.
Okay. Other comments, questions? All right, thank you very much. Yes, Ms. West.
I just have one more. Gender which the student consistently asserts at school is used. It just seems as though the policy is still working in binary. If the gender that the student is asserting is none.
Or it could be gender fluid. They're not sure.
Right. So the idea of consistently asserts at school, if the gender you're asserting is not having a gender, it sort of cascades into a lot of the rest of this policy, especially when you get into the sports and...
Mm-hmm. So you're talking, and again, so much of this is language, and I'm the first one to admit that I was born in a different generation, and I'm learning. Every time I talk to the kids or the students, I learn something new. So are you talking like in a situation of somebody's androgynous, or they're just gender fluid and they're still trying to find...
Yeah, if somebody's non-binary, and the issue of sports comes up, or not the issue of, or just any of essentially, there are folks that don't identify as either male or female, so then it's...
The law has not addressed that yet. And, sports, the New Hampshire Interscholastic Athletic Association, there's a lot of guidance in here from them because there's big cases going on right now, especially in Connecticut at the high school level. But, a lot of this is developing, but, in order to have the sports proceed, the student needs to, prior to the season, and I won't repeat everything that's in here, but they have to, either come forward and identify with the gender that they want to be able to compete on. And then the wording says, once they do that, as a general rule, that will be the gender that they will be identified for the remainder of their high school year. Now, if something else happens, that's why it says as a general rule, and then we could take a look at that. But this is such a fluid area of the law that a lot of this is written so that we can have a policy and we can modify it as we need to, and hopefully not put ourselves in a litigious situation in some of the areas that we know there is guidance on. So, but Kate, I would be happy if you want to send me some specific questions or concerns, I'll run them to ground and be happy to get back with you on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can tell you as a board that when I met with the Tide Pride students, the curriculum issue was a big deal to them, a big deal. So.
Other questions or comments? Well, I will observe that the detail and the effort that is put into the discussion tonight pretty much reflected what went on during the communication and policy. We worked very hard at that time, and I thank Gina for her leadership in that. As we work through this policy to try to make it the best that it can possibly be, please read through it in the next month. It will come up for second reading, and I'm sure we will have a very detailed discussion at that time as well. Yes, Ms. Cannon.
Karen, can I ask you to send the revised vision to everybody so that we make sure that they're reading the right version that we'd like to work from?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. And would you please post that as well as as for our discussion and put it in the web so the public can read that? All right.
If I can make one other comment.
Certainly.
Then I'll sit down. At the committee meeting, one of the members was very concerned, or the membership was concerned about whether or not we had enough gender-neutral bathrooms, what the cost might be as you were moving into the budget season, changing rooms, so on and so forth. So Matt Cashman and I, we did a whole tour. We did the high school. Matt knows, of course, the middle school, and assured me the same thing. We have right now in the high school, I can tell you that there is there's a gender-neutral bathroom on the I'm going to say the first floor by the gym, along with a changing room, and then I believe there's one other gender-neutral bathroom sort of by the front office, as I recall. Yep, by Commons A. So we went through and picked out areas. The good news is we don't have to do a lot of construction. There's other restrooms that are available. You have the big ones for the kids. There's other options available to be able to convert a couple other bathrooms into gender neutral so that the kids, you know, if they're way on one end of the building and they have a class at the other one, you know, they're not running in between classes to be able to use the restroom or change for gym or whatever. So if the board wants some sort of plan for the next meeting to discuss where we might have those bathrooms, Matt and I could put together something if that is what the group wants to see, exactly what we're talking about. But as I said, the good news is we have them, we just need to convert them. For example, and I'm not saying we would do this, we have 2 staff bathrooms, for example, on all of the floors. They're exactly the same and they're 1 stall each. So potentially if we had 1 staff bathroom that's male and female, then potentially, and I'm not saying we've made this decision, you could use the other one as a gender-neutral bathroom for students, if you follow me, without having to do a whole, you know, big construction project.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher-Anderson. That was one of the questions that had come up in a point of discussion during our committee meeting. We probably don't need to go into the details of that in the next meeting. However, should this policy pass, I would expect that there will be follow-up discussions and meetings to clarify and to make sure that we are abiding by the policy. So thank you. Very good. Let's see. I need to jump back to my agenda. What's up next? Oh, of course, it's the Negotiations Committee, which I will be reporting on. Report of the Negotiations Committee meeting on February 17th. The committee met. We reviewed the contracts that will be coming up for negotiation this year, and with the summary, and that's pretty much all I can say about that particular committee at this time. So with that, we will move on to a report from our ad hoc committee, anti-racism and discrimination. I don't know when the last meeting was, but Mr. Weinberger, Ms. West, or Ms. Higgins, who will be giving us a summary of that? Mr. Weinberg?
We met on February 9th. One of the main goals of the meeting was to prioritize what the mission statement was, and so that kind of manifested and came to fruition, and leader Michelle kind of cultivated a strong statement, as well as kind of going over the group agreements and norms to kind of understand how the group will be facilitated. In the future, we begin to separate into more subgroups. Donna Pally is now leading one to help find a way to communicate via the website, so we will be meeting in the next couple weeks. Additionally, we tried to just find what our different roles and leadership structure was so that we can try to be most efficient and thoughtful in our discourse.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for this committee? All right, not seeing any. Superintendent, I believe we're at the proposed calendar of meetings.
Thank you, Jim. If you look at your page 79 in your book, you'll see the schedule for March, and you have a very busy month. Wednesday night, I want to bring your attention to, and those out in the community, that there will be a special board meeting held here at the High School Auditorium at 5:30 to have an open forum discussion relative to the SRO position. We intend to provide some data that people have asked for relative to the position, and we'll have dialogue with the community and hear from our folks around that issue. The following week, you have 2 more budget sessions. You have one that will be the session necessary for you to post, look at your, and post a proposed budget, not the final budget, but a proposal, so that people can begin to see what's in that budget, what is it, what's the makeup. And again, same week, we'll be discussing the enrollments at the high school and CRTC, which is really important as it relates to your budget, making sure that you have enough positions and the enrollment in the classes, especially at the high school and middle school. High school and CRTC, I'm sorry. The following week, again, you'll be working on budget open session. That'll give you time to discuss. I think that's really important. Jack and I talked about that today. The importance of you having time to really go through, ask questions, dialogue, debate those important elements in the budget. The 16th is, I think, a very important meeting, and that'll be the instructional committee meeting. I'll work with Barb Higgins, and we'll put together an agenda for that. Right now, we want to talk about spring sports. We have a brief presentation from Mike Reardon around the advisory program at the high school, which is Mike is supporting, as well as next steps in terms of student instruction and coming back to school. And then one of the important meetings is the Joint Finance and Capital Facilities. That's a combination committee that will discuss the middle school planning. I know that the committee has asked that we begin to look at a group to help with some schematics, and so we begin to understand what the needs are at the school. The following week, again, a very busy week, executive committee as well as a public hearing. That first public hearing at Millbrook on the 22nd of March will not be live. It will be recorded and will be presented on TV the following day, or as soon as when Josh can get it ready. So that's at Millbrook. Policy and Communication Committee on the Tuesday. I think that'll give us a good chance to talk about those policies again, making sure we're all on track. We'll have a chance to look at the edits from Attorney Dean Eggert so that we're all comfortable with the policies. Followed by the public hearing again here, though, at the high school, 7 o'clock, which will be broadcast live for a presentation on the budget. And the last week in March, you have another work session. You know, your public hearings are an opportunity for you to hear from the public and for you to reflect on your budget and perhaps make changes associated with what the public brings to your attention. So that's the purpose of the hearing, and then time for you after that to deliberate, to make sure your budget is what you want. And then, of course, final, which is the tough one, on the 31st, is that you vote for your budget for the 21-22 school year. So that's the month of March. You have a very busy month. I think the April is in there, not quite so busy, but your school board meeting the first of the month, another instructional meeting. Again, these are important, these meetings, in terms of our students. Communication and policy, again, will be on the 14th, Wednesday the 14th. We will be looking at 2 important issues at that meeting: bullying, which I think you heard Alice talk about tonight. They've done a lot of great work with Donna and Karen, as well as the suicide prevention plan, which we indicated we would have ready for the committee's review. You've already passed the suicide policy, but part of the policy is that we must have a district plan. We'll bring that forward to that meeting. And finally, before our spring recess, you'll have your executive committee negotiations and capital facilities that week before school vacation. Busy, busy.
I will ask Superintendent that in April, I'm looking at that as a little less busy. However, I noticed that we do not have a City and Community Relations Committee meeting, and may ask that the chair and his board or his committee think about a date they would be interested in if they wanted to have a meeting during that month.
Great, thank you.
Parker, would you look into that for us, please? Thank you.
Dave, I'll give you a call and we can set something up. Did I forget anything else in that month?
Not that I know of, but does anyone else have any questions or any comments with regards to the calendar? Mr. Weinberg?
I know we just talked about possible dates for the community, or I know the ongoing conversation. We could perhaps look at March 29th if that open budget session remains an open session that we might not need for something else. This could be readapted into community relations.
Jonathan, I'm not ready to schedule anything.
Okay, so Mr. Parker, if you will just contact the superintendent and take a look at where we are with regards to our schedule, we'd be happy to include that in there and schedule that.
Okay, I'll, like I said, I'll give Dave a call and we'll get something together. I agree.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you, Superintendent.
You're welcome.
We are now at agenda item number 12. This is our second public comment session. This is a comment session where the public may comment on any subject that they wish, whether it was on the agenda or not. The policy 132 governing the comments, and as I'll say again, is that comments should be civil, respectful, and they should limit themselves to 5 minutes. But at this time, I will open it up to any public comments in the auditorium. Anyone who would like to make a comment? Then you. We have two. So please, as I said, please limit it to 5 minutes. If you look at me and I'm giving you sort of a big wave, that means you're pretty close to your 5-minute time frame. So go right ahead. Please state your name and so that Lyndon can record it. And thank you for coming down.
Again, I'm Maureen Adams, parent of 2 students at Concord High. Again, I want to, in reference to the, I think maybe Runlet teacher, I can't remember which, she's a parent anyway of a 9-year-old. I'm not minimizing patients or people who contract COVID. 75,000 people in this state have had positive cases, most of them nursing homes, most of them elderly, not all of them, lots of them asymptomatic. I'm not minimizing people who have had trouble with the symptoms at all, any more than I would influenza, bronchitis, pneumonia, that have very long-lasting effects. But again, we're making decisions on thousands of kids' futures and educations, and I really think we need to look at the facts. 0.05% of New Hampshire residents have positive cases. 0.05%. We're making decisions based on that. That's not deaths and that's not hospitalizations. It's simply positive cases. We used to say kids needed 180 days of school. That was like the norm. And now that's out the window. We have thrown away months and months of education for these kids. And I don't understand how that's okay. I think there are possibilities to maybe just send high school kids. I have lots of friends in Europe, and their cases were spiking. They're already back in school. They're sending just high school kids back to school. Some towns are sending just younger kids, and they're making, it's not an all or nothing thing. And people who want to stay at home can stay at home. I think we need to address teachers who will not come to school. My suggestion would be to have the state epidemiologist come and talk to them, talk about risks, talk about mitigation, talk about anything they need to hear to be comfortable doing their jobs. Again, I'm extremely frustrated that we talk about all these other topics and not talk about getting our kids back in school. I get it. You can only have so many items on the agenda. But I feel like it's the elephant in the room that we're not addressing. And I still don't understand why kids are not in school on Wednesday. That makes no sense to me. I've had no good answer for that. And when we talk about getting kids back into school 4 days a week, why are we not going back to 5 days a week? I don't understand that. I don't understand the criteria by which we're still keeping kids out of school. I can't help but think it's just plain fear and refusal of some people to come into the school. So please consider the futures of these children, and please make decisions based on fact and risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. We have one other person who would like to speak, so come on down, state your name so that we have it for the record.
Hello, my name is Aspen Hopkins. I'm a sophomore here at Concord High. And yeah, I wanted to just say, first of all, thank you so much for letting me speak on this policy, the transgender and gender nonconforming policy. And thank you to Ms. Karen Fisher-Anderson for including me and some other students in the conversation. I do identify as transgender, so I think this was a really important policy for me, and it was a really important policy to the people that I know as young people. So I just wanted to say that I obviously speak in favor of more inclusive health class, and that although health class is not segregated, you know, girls over here, boys over here, that it does feel a little bit segregated only because there's a lot of gender language in that class, and there's a lot of talk about, you know, your birth sex in that class, and there's not a lot of talk about gender nonconformity and gender identity and what that means and what it could mean to some students, which I think if we're not going to talk about it in health class, you know, where else would we talk about it? I think that's important, and I think that that's important to go in a class curriculum somewhere. I wanted to say that the policy the version of it that I saw was the amended version, and it did have good gender neutral language, but that it's important to keep that all throughout the policy as we are talking about everyone in the policy, and that it's important to include non-binary students in the policy. And what else? I wanted to talk about having more bathrooms that were gender neutral. I have not had a class on the level where the bathroom next to the commons next to the gym is, in the gym foyer. I haven't had a class on that floor. No one has had a class on that floor because it's the cafeteria and the gym are there. So it is a little bit out of the way no matter where you are in the building. I didn't even know we had a second one, which is a whole other thing. And I've had a lot of classes up on the 5th floor of the opposite building, and even a lot of classes on the 5th floor of the building where the bathroom is. And I had to have that weird, awkward talk with your teachers, like, hey, I'm going to take like 10 minutes to use the bathroom, which is not great. And I think that it's important to not have to have that talk, or should anyone have to have that talk. There are a lot of bathrooms, and I know that it's important for staff to have bathrooms, obviously, but I think it was cool that we don't have to do a lot of construction to have more bathrooms, and I think that's important. What else? I think that on the topic of non-binary students and with gender-segregated sports, that honestly they could just pick, it's obviously not that easy, but if they could pick where they'd be most comfortable, that could be a solution without having to like create a only non-binary team, which would not be great where we are right now. I would wanted to say that, you know, obviously gender fluid students and gender fluid gender expression is not the most out there of gender expression. That's not like the height of gender expression. Like beyond that, there's nothing else. There's so much. It's such a crazy spectrum. There's so many things that not even I know, that not even most adults know, which I think is important too. I just wanted to say that with the sexual orientation being perceived thing, that obviously however a person perceives their sexual orientation, that is their sexual orientation, period. And then whatever language best encompasses that idea, I think is important to be put in the policy. And that's it that I have to say. So I just wanted to say thank you for your work on this really important policy, and it means a lot to me that I was able to speak today.
Thank you for your observation and insights, and we very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Aspen.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else here in the auditorium that wants to speak tonight on any subject? Not seeing anyone. Mr. Dunn, do we have anyone waiting to speak with us or to make a comment online?
So far, we do not.
We'll wait a minute or two. Sometimes there's a little delay in our broadcast. But if anyone would like to make a comment on any topic within our policy number 132, which limits you to 5 minutes, please do so now and indicate by raising your hand. Mr. Dunn, I don't see anyone there. Is there anyone else in the auditorium that would like to make a comment? Yes.
I just want to thank you all for what you do. I know that it's a lot of work and a lot of frustration, but I think at the end of the day, it's all about the kids. Thank you all for it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming in and commenting this evening. The comment for those who couldn't hear because there's not a microphone there was just a thank you to the board for the work we're doing and the willingness to listen to comments and the consideration we're giving it. Yes, Ms. Higgins.
I just wanted to comment on the Aspen, that's your name, yes? Hi. So my first year teaching health here, and I bring up health because as a health educator, it's an important subject to me, and that we meet the needs mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually of all of our students. My first year, I was teaching freshman health, and I assigned an in-class essay on how you would want it was in the relationships unit, and how would you want your significant other to treat you. And I'm quite sure I used boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, that type of language. And I had a student in my class whose older sister had run track for me for several years. And everyone finished, and I invited anyone who wanted to share, and he raised his hand, could he share? And I said, of course. And he talked about his man, and that his perfect man, and it was a beautiful essay. So this was almost 20 years ago now, where identifying publicly as gay was not at all regular at the time. So I was in a bit of a panic as an educator, thinking, what's going to happen here? Got a standing ovation. It was an unbelievably profound moment. The reason I bring it up is any participation by someone publicly declaring a piece of themselves that isn't understood by public or even their peers is incredibly brave and absolutely necessary for us as a board to ever make effective policy or good decisions. So I just want to thank you, and I want you to know that Concord High School was also the first high school in the United States with a sanctioned gay-straight student alliance, and I remember it. That's how old I am. So I will work very, very hard to make sure that these policies are comfortable and correct and effective to the best of our ability. But I just wanted to thank you. I appreciate your willingness to stand up for who you are.
Thank you, Ms. Higgins. Does anyone else have any other business for this evening? Not seeing anyone's hands, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Ms. Walsh. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Weinberg. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.